Okay, we're finishing up Denver here. All right, so this is what's so important in this last module. We call them Denver Accelerators because you can't find your Denver all by yourself. We talked about that last module. If you're trying to be an army of one, you're gonna lose. You need people to help you do that. So, hey, Steve, how do we find the people who can help me with my Denver? So here's how you do it. I call it everyone's favorite subject. Listen, what is everyone's favorite subject? You should know this. It's ourselves, right? It's me. I love me some me. Listen, I joke around with audiences and I say, listen, I wish every conversation was like, listen, enough about me, enough about me. What do you think about me? I mean, wouldn't that be great? And you feel the same way if you're being honest. Here's the problem. No one wants to hear about you and no one wants to hear about me. You know why? Because it cuts into the time that they've got to talk about their favorite subject, which is them. So listen, I am begging you. You want to find your Denver fast? Let them talk about their favorite subject. Just let them. Listen, don't you know all about you anyway? How about it's time to learn about something that they love to talk about? Two things happen. They love you for letting them talk about their favorite subject, and you get to learn about it. That's why I call it, you've got to be purely curious. Purely curious. And this is so important because if you throw any kind of schmoozing in there, it is awful. Listen, imagine if someone says to you, hey, listen, they always say, how's the drive? And I'll give you a story about this in just a minute. But when they get to their real action points, it always has I, want, or need in it. All right? Hey, all these fluff, they act like they're curious. But then they go, hey, listen, I need to know if you can do this for me. Or I want this. Or, I. It doesn't freaking work. All right? Because if you're being purely curious, you're asking just because you want to know, not because you need something. That's when it starts to stink. And when someone's schmoozing, it is evident quickly, very, very quickly. And we all hate it, including you. But when someone wants to learn about you just because they find you interesting, you inherently like them. All right? That's what happens. So that's one of the biggest things you've got to understand. You've got to understand. You've got to want to know just because you want to know, not because you have an agenda, a need, a want, or a desire. You just got to want to know. Listen, I was watching a Mark Cuban video the other night, and he talked about the power of being curious. Listen, if you're not a curious person, you got problems because you'll never uncover all the treasures that are out there. See, I look at everyone walking in the world. I really do. I look at everybody walking in the world as a potential treasure. It's like going on a treasure hunt. And I just want to know what they do, how they do what they do, who they know, why they know what they know. And because, listen, I don't know everybody, but I am connected to a lot of people who do know a lot of people. So that's how it is. And by the way, when you're being curious about people, the more successful people are, the more they tend to misdirect, right? Here's what I do, because I know a lot of people and I can help a lot of people with knowing what I know, but I don't volunteer that. I don't vomit it out there because, what I like to say is confidence is quiet. Confidence is quiet. So when people typically tell me outside of these programs, they're like, Steve, you rode with the Blue Angels. They're usually just jealous or envious, but no one hardly ever says, wait a minute, how did you do that? Tell me what the secret was, because obviously you know something I don't. They never do that. But when they do say something about something extraordinary that I might have done, and like, man, how'd you get to do that? I will use my best Snoop Dogg on them. That came out of a movie. And I say this a lot of times, what's called misdirects. I do things like, listen, I know people who rob people. We all laugh, and then I get back to them. I get back to their favorite subject and away from my favorite subject. Because trust me, I want to tell them, but I'm not learning or discovering treasures when I do. I'm learning when they're talking, and I'm learning about what they're doing and who they know and how they know what they do. So it's just like treasure hunting. But the more people misdirect, the more fascinating it becomes. And trust me, if they were to say, no, Steve, really, I truly, really want to know, how did you get to do that? I will vomit all that information on them. But no one wants to know that bad because they're too focused about their favorite subject. All they want to do is get back to talking about their favorite subject, which is them. So I just let them. All right? And when you do, that's when the treasures start revealing themselves like crazy. All right? It's like I was in a class the other day talking to a young man. And keep in mind, I own a commercial real estate that is owned by a company called Blue Pearl. Okay, it's a veterinary hospital. And I have a lease and I have contacts and all that, but they're slow to get back to me a lot of times. And one of my Denvers, weirdly enough, is I really wish I knew someone inside of this huge company. Okay, it's called the Mars Corporation. They make peanut M&Ms and M&Ms and all kinds of Mars bars. I don't know anybody in that company that I could go to for help if I ever needed it. It's one of my Denvers. I'd love to find them one time. Here's how it works. Talking to this young man in college, and I'm helping him. His name is James. And I'm like, he's like, yeah, I'm going to go home to Nashville to see my mom over Christmas break. And I'm like, cool. And I say to him, you can't make this stuff up. I could just leave it at that, but I'm curious. I want to know just because I want to know. So I say to him, and this is my life, by the way. I'm like, James, cool, what's your mom do? Now I'm like, who knows? Maybe she works at a jail. I don't know. I have no idea, but I'm curious enough to ask. And you can't make this up. He says, well, my mom she's on the board of directors. She's a lawyer, but she's also on the board of directors for the Mars Corporation, specifically Blue Pearl Vet Hospitals. I'm like, are you out of your freaking mind? Really? He's like, yeah, why? And I'm like, could you introduce me to your mom? He's like, yeah, but why? I'm like, because, dude, I have a Blue Pearl veterinary hospital that I'm the landlord for, and I'd love to know somebody on the inside that could help me with certain problems that I have. He's like, well, I'll just call my mom. See, my point is I could have easily said, good, your mom's a lawyer. Whatever, right? But I kept asking because I was curious. You've got to be like a kindergartner going, why? And things will just develop. Here's a big story. Years ago, I'm flying a plane, and it's a plane called the Pilatus, $2.5 million airplane. And I met a guy in the aviation world, and he's like, Steve, come over to actually Nashville again. He said, come over to Nashville. We're having a big party for all these aviators, and come join us. So I'm like, aviation, I'm in. And I run over to Nashville, which is an hour flight for me. And I go to this guy's house. I don't know anybody there, but there's about 100 people. This guy had a big house. There's about 100 people there. Well, I find myself about an hour into the party, standing around 5 other guys in a circle, having a drink, and we're talking about the airplanes that we own and that we fly. It's just that simple. And I'm sitting there going around the circle, asking them, they don't know about my plane. I'm asking about theirs, their favorite subject, which is nice, it's pleasant, because I just truly want to know. I'm not here for anything. There's about a 75-year-old guy, shorter guy, named Fred, who was there in the circle. And I get to him, and I'm like, Fred, what kind of plane do you have? He tells me the name of the plane, and he mispronounces the name of his airplane. Now, this is a $3 million airplane, and he got the name wrong. Now, we all knew it. Okay, we all knew it. So I thought I'd help him, and I was like, Fred, what's your tail number? Because mine is 25EP, 25 Echo Papa. You say it on the radio like you say your kid's name. You know your tail number like you know your kid's name because you say it so much. And he's like, I don't really know. And I'm like, oh my God. Now we all know it. And I'm like, Fred, what's the year of your airplane? He's like, don't know. He's starting to look stupid and feel it because he can feel all of us are like, are you kidding? And finally he just looked at me and he said, Steve, he goes, all I know is that when I call for my plane to be ready, it's just ready. Now, for reference, when I call for my plane to be ready, nothing happens. Nothing at all. I got to go out there, open up the hangar doors, clean the windows, put the gas in it. He just walks up and there's 2 pilots waiting on him. That's a clue. Now listen, I got nothing here. I'm here for a party. I'm having fun. I don't want or need anything. Listen, I kid you not. The other 4 guys either thought he was too stupid or too boring to be with, and they literally just kind of dispersed into the crowd. I'm thinking, I got to know. How does this guy not know the name or anything about a $3 million airplane? I promise you, this is exactly what happened. So, I'm 6'3", and I'm looking down on old Fred, and he's a little guy, but just as nice as they come. And I took a chance that he was retired. So I said, Fred, I said, what did you do before you retired? And you can't make this up. He's like, Steve, he goes, remember how back in the day for us older people, you used to take your credit card and they would chunk it, they'd slide it over this thing to make an imprint of it. He's like, yeah, he goes, now this is before the chips. He goes, you know how you slide your card now? I was like, yeah, of course. He goes, that was me. I did that. Damn, right? You realized why a $3 million airplane wasn't important to this guy. He was so wealthy, it didn't matter. And nobody knew it. So that's not where the treasure is. That's just cool, right? So we get going along through the night and we get talking about what he does and we're just becoming friends, and I'm sharing some about me and some about him, but more about him than me because he was much more interesting. And a little side note, I'll never forget, well, let me tell you this. He ended up telling me that he has an investment group in Nashville, just like on Shark Tank, that all the deals in Nashville, all the deals, come through his desk. And he said, Steve, he goes, he just liked me because it was so pleasant for him to talk about something. I didn't want anything. So he offered it up. The treasure showed itself. And he said, Steve, he goes, if you ever want to, come over and be involved in some of these deals, we'd love to have you. Well, yes, I would. And I'm thinking in Nashville, there has got to be at least 300 people that would kill to have a seat at that table, to see all these deals come through. It was so bad that when I did come over to go to sit at these deals, everyone there was worth at least $100 million. I'm not even in the realm of that, all right? And it was so bad I had to tell Fred, listen, I'm not that guy. And he's like, Steve, it's okay. He goes, we just like you and just want you here. And I got exposed to a whole different world, and a Denver came true for me that I never thought was even possible. I'm sitting with these huge players, watching these cool deals come through, meeting amazing people, and being part of deals that I never thought I'd be part of. And that's how it works when you're purely curious. A little side note I was going to say earlier, Fred and I were waiting outside the hotel, or the house. They had some valet people doing all of our cars. And we're waiting for our cars. And he said he was so excited to talk to me at this point. He's like, Steve, he goes, I had this coolest call the other day because I invested in these songwriters. And I was like, really? And he's like, yeah. He goes, and they called me from the Grammys the other day. And they were so excited that they'd won a Grammy. He goes, and I was just so excited to hear the excitement in their voice because we're all trying to help each other get better. And I was like, Fred, what song did they write? And he's like, oh, Steve, he goes, it was that song by Carrie Underwood called Jesus Take the Wheel. And I'm like, for the love of God. It was at the time, it was one of the biggest hits ever. And he had backed the songwriters. But he didn't care about the money. He cared about the joy in their voices when they called him. Just little side notes. So it's just like, if I ever wanted to meet probably Carrie Underwood, I could probably make that happen, right? Because Fred gave me the treasure. Life is just a treasure hunt, and it can come through for you. And when you also, like the Blue Pearl, like that, all these deals, this is my life, is because I have such an extraordinary life and find all of my Denvers, or at least a lot of them, because I'm purely curious. And I'm just asking people, what do you do? How do you do it? Who do you know? And I'm listening actively. Listen, when I get called for jury duty, I never get picked, but I love being there because everybody does it for me. If you're on jury duty or you're picked, and they're deciding who's going to be actually on the jury, everyone in the room, probably 50 people, had to stand up, say who they are, what they do, where they live. And I'm like, this is like the best thing ever, because I don't have to ask. Because you're sitting around people that are so freaking cool that no one ever asks what they do. No one's asking you. I'll never forget one day, I think this is probably how I got the term Denver, is I was on an airplane writing my book on my computer, sitting next to two young people, a guy and a girl. And, you know, they didn't have Denvers. And I'm writing my book and I'm talking to him and I'm like, hey, you know, he's like, you know, what are you doing? I'm writing my book. And, you know, they didn't ask about my book. I'm leaving all these crumbs, but no one's eating the crumbs. And I said to him, I was like, you know, what do you do? And well, it turns out he was a pole vaulter in college. And in pole vaulting, apparently you screw up a lot, get a lot of injuries. So because of that, he had a lot of medical procedures, a lot of implants, but it created an interest in him to be part of Stryker, Stryker, I think it's Stryker is a medical device implant company. And I said, yeah. I said, I know Stryker. Now, the fact that I knew Stryker should have been a clue, right? But he wasn't curious. He was focused on himself. And I'm not going to give him all the answers he needs. You got to go hunt for it a little bit. And I said, oh yeah, I know Stryker. I said, it's a great company. He should have said, how do you know Stryker? Because that should have been a clue. And just like Fred was with the airplane, not knowing the airplane. How? How is that possible? Had he asked me, which he did not, he went back to watching The Office, the movie The Office, with his girlfriend. But had he asked me, how do you know Stryker? I could have said, I'm personal friends with one of the regional managers. If he wanted a fast track into Stryker, he was one question away from it. And I could have given him this guy's name, given him this guy's number. He could have called the guy and had instant access, VIP access, an accelerator into what his Denver was, which was working for Stryker. See, all these opportunities are going by you because you can't just find your Denvers. They're not going to just flop on your desk or on your front porch. You've got to go looking for them. And to find them, you've got to be curious. I hope we're tracking here. There's a whole lot more to this, but it's just like treasure hunters because like our module says, is people know people you can't even imagine they know. And no one's asking. But when they do, they'll be like, oh yeah, I know so-and-so, all right? It's just like James in school. The ask for him to call his mom to see if she could help me was a given. And I'll be meeting his mom soon because I want to make a connection with that. By the way, I'm also looking into two other businesses. One of them is tiny homes, just kind of exploring that as a Denver, right? I don't know much about it, but I'm exploring it. He says, as we're talking about his mom, I said, what else does she do? He's like, oh, well, she has investment homes in other countries, which I'm interested in, right? And she owns a bunch of tiny homes. I'm like, this is like a mother load. I'm like, when I go meet his mom, I am going to be all about her because keep in mind, I've helped her son, okay, achieve a lot. So she's happy to help me. We're all helping each other. I'm going to learn about Blue Pearl. I'm going to learn about tiny homes. I'm going to learn about why she picked these other countries to have investment property in and why. All these things are going to be given to me on a platter. All I got to do is get James and fly over to Nashville. And it'll all be dialed up because he'll just say, Mom, let's go to lunch. All right? Last story. When you give without wanting anything in return. This is a little bit different from being purely curious. This is just doing things for others because it's the right thing to do and how it can come back to you. That's the biblical part I talked to you about earlier in this module. Here's an example. Years ago, a friend of mine in aviation here in town had a private airport. A private airport is where people live on the airport and they have their planes under their house and they have a private runway. Well, he built this private airport, spent a ton of money, and got all the approvals, so he thought, from the FAA to have this private airport. Did it all, made the runway, living in harmony with everybody. It's all good. Then somebody decided he built it too close to the actual airport and was creating a conflict. in the airspace. He wasn't, but some bureaucrat decided he was. And they said, you're done. All this money, all this effort, all these homes, with all these airplanes, and they weren't allowed to use the runway. That's a big kick in the butt, right? Well, I was running the local newspaper, and I was his friend. He came to me and said, I need your help. Now, I got nothing in this. I don't have a home out there. I'm not flying there. It's not a problem for me. But it was the right thing to do. So I took everything I had, and I went to bat for him and used the power of the press to over a year's effort, his efforts and my efforts, we won and got him his airport back. And he was forever grateful for my help that I didn't have to do. All right, feel good. I'm happy. Fast forward 2 years, all right? We're sitting there. I've got a little airplane, and I'm getting ready to sell it. Well, I didn't know when I bought the airplane, there was a lien on it by a bank in New York that I was not aware was that there was a lien on the airplane. Fast forward a couple years. I've got an airplane that I'm getting ready to sell. I didn't know that when I bought it, it had a lien on it from a bank in New York that prevented the sale. Even though the debt had been paid, the lien had not been cleared. Therefore, the title wasn't clear. Therefore, I couldn't sell the airplane. For tax reasons, I only had like 8 days before the end of the year, before the tax advantages, which we'll talk about later in these modules, how to make taxes work in your favor instead of against you. I only had 8 days to get this lien cleared from a bank in New York who I didn't know anyone there. It was a big bank, and the red tape was going to be huge, and I had 8 days to solve it. And I'm just kind of screwed. This is how it comes back to you. I'm sitting with Ed, my buddy who I helped saved his airport. I'm sitting in his hangar, and we're just having a cup of coffee. And I'm bitching. And I'm like, he's like, what you doing? I'm like, I'm selling my airplane, but I can't. There's a lien from this stupid bank in New York that I've got to get cleared before I can make the transaction. I had it sold. I just couldn't do the deal. He says to me nonchalantly, he's like, what bank? I don't even remember the name of the bank, but I tell him the name. And he's like, really? And I'm like, what? He's like, the CEO of that bank's my personal friend. Now, I'm in South Carolina. I'm like, are you kidding me? He's like, wait a minute. He picks the phone up. You can't make this up. He picks the phone up, calls the guy, says, hey, Bill, whatever his name was, this is Ed. Got a problem. My buddy here's got a lien at your bank. It's been cleared up. You can see it. We'll show you why. I need to go away. He hangs the phone up and he's like, done. I'm in disbelief. All right? How could this even be possible? How does he know a guy in New York? By the way, this is my life because I spend my life doing what I'm doing for you, which is trying to give you something. I don't want anything in return. I'm not trying to change my life. I'm trying to change yours. All right? And he, just like that, made a problem go away because he was trying to help me for helping him. It's the great circle. So when you're out there being purely curious with people, wanting to know things just because you want to know, you will uncover all kinds of treasures. And your Denvers, if you have them, will start becoming illuminated quickly. Things that you didn't think were possible will be possible. But like I say, people know a lot of people. We just never ask. And if you want to identify your Denver, then you've got to start asking and seeing how you can find your Denvers faster. And it's so much fun because you've got to start realizing everybody's dying to talk about their favorite subject. You're just not letting them. So start. Quick tip. Try something really easy. If you're in college, go to your apartment. Go to your dorm room. Go to your friends' apartments or dorm rooms. Look on the walls. Look on their desk. Look there. Their passions are right in front of you. They're on the wall. They're on the desk. And no one ever asks. No one. Ask. Watch what happens. Watch them go from this to, hey, what's going on, man? To you go, dude, what is with you in that picture? It's on their wall for a reason. And watch their nonverbals. They'll do this and they'll go, oh, well, let me tell you what that is. And they'll be subconsciously so happy you asked. If you're in the work environment, go next door to your neighbor's office and look around. Radar their office. Radar it. Their passions are right in front of you. If you walk into my office, you'd have to be a moron to not realize Steve likes aviation. Steve likes his kids. Steve likes, certain things. There are so many clues in this office if you looked around that if you just asked, I would love to tell you the story behind it. No one ever asks, which is okay with me because it gives me more time to talk about their favorite subject. All right? Let me wrap this up with this thing. One last story, because I cannot emphasize how being curious can save the day. It can find your Denvers, it can make you money, it can do everything, because you've got to realize everyone's dying to talk about their favorite damn subject. Let them. And it starts small, like I said, dorm rooms and offices. Start asking. But it can also go big, all right? Years ago, when I was running a newspaper, we had a major grocery store that their contract to advertise was coming up for renewal. And I needed the renewal. I needed the sale because I'm not sure we would have made it without it. So I drove to North Carolina to meet with this, stay with me here, this 45-year-old vice president of communications for this grocery store, all right? Can't make this stuff up. I'm sitting out in the lobby. I'm out there with all the other sales reps, waiting my turn to go in and see him. And I'm like, you know what? I'm gonna be all about him. I need this sale, but I need more than that. I need a connection with this guy. So I walk in and I'm thinking, I'm gonna radar his office, I'm gonna find his passions, and I'm gonna purely, curiously ask about them. Because I really do like to know. And I'm not gonna schmooze. It was great until I walked into his office. And there was nothing on the walls, nothing on his desk, literally, except a yellow notepad. And this was his office. And I'm like, dear God, this sucks. So like everybody, we sit there. I got nothing. We're talking about the weather. We're talking about the drive up. And by the way, this was a $250,000 contract. I needed this $250,000 contract. And I'm sitting there watching it go out the window. Just go out the window because it's going bad. There's no connection. There's no nothing. There's no reason to want to do business with me. There's no nothing. And finally I got desperate. And I said, his name was Jim. 45, remember this, he was a 45-year-old VP of the communication marketing department for this grocery store. Out of desperation, because in my mind I was like, this looks like it sucks. I said to him, and he's, I'm just another person coming in wanting the very same thing. And I said, Jim, what do you like to do when you're not here? Because in my mind I was like, anything's better than this. You can't make this stuff up, guys. You can't. He's leaning back in his chair because I'm bored. He's bored out of his mind. And I asked him with pure curiosity about his favorite subject. Didn't know what it was, right? 45-year-old VP. He launches forward in his chair. They don't realize they do this. He launched forward and he's like, Steve, then you can't see this coming. I sure did not. He said, I love to collect G.I. Joes. And I'm sitting there going, oh my God. Now, I know if I laugh, it's going to be $250,000 loud. So I didn't laugh, but God knows I didn't see it coming. I'm like, oh my God, a 45-year-old man's collecting G.I. Joes? What, are we doing dolls next? What are we doing? But I realized this very clearly. One, if I laughed, I was going to lose a lot of money. But two, I thought, you know what? I don't know anything about G.I. Joes, and it's his favorite subject. So how about we both learn? We both enjoy ourselves. I'll learn, and he'll tell me about his favorite subject. So I started saying, well, tell me about G.I. Joes. And he starts telling me all about G.I. Joes, just like I would aviation. And I learned after about 5 minutes, it's actually a bigger deal than I ever realized. And after 15 minutes, I had learned a lot about G.I. Joes, and it was actually pretty fascinating. So we got done. He is just like thrilled that he got to talk about his favorite subject. And I just thought it was disingenuous to say, oh, hey, Jim, sign this for me, will you? I just thought that would just make it schmoozing. So for reasons I cannot explain, promise you, I didn't ask for the contract. I wasn't going to be that guy. And I left. He was just so thrilled, shaking my hand. It was great. I just left. And I'm driving home without a contract, without $250,000. It gives me a little pain right now. And I don't know how I had the courage to do it. I don't remember. But here's what I do remember. I went back to my office with my newfound knowledge of G.I. Joes. I bought him a collector, a $75, which was huge in the G.I. Joe market. I bought him a $75 collectible G.I. Joe. It came a couple days later from Amazon. I wrote him a handwritten note, put it in a box, put the contract on top of it, sent it to him. A week later, I got a handwritten note back from him, thanking me profusely for the best gift he'd ever gotten, and a signed $250,000 contract. So for $75, I got $250,000. Now, if you're sitting there like me or many going, well, that is schmoozing, Steve. You were just schmoozing. Well, maybe, but what if I'd sent him a chocolate cake instead? All right? I probably would have still gotten the $250,000 contract back. But what I got in return with the contract was a whole lot more. I got a connection. The next year I went up to see him, it was not sitting in the lobby. While everybody else was sitting in the lobby, he was like, Steve, come on back. I brought him a gift, G.I. Joe. We talked, had a great time. Everyone wants to talk about their favorite subjects. You just have to let them. And if you want to find Denvers and accelerate your growth, start being purely curious. I like to say in speeches, stop being interesting and start being interested. Let me say that again. Stop being so darn interesting and start being interested. When you're interested instead of interesting, everything will change for you because you'll start learning how much these people truly have to offer you and how many ways and doors can open up that you didn't even know existed. I could do this kind of thing, what I'm telling you, story after story after story after story for months. I have so many of these stories because being purely curious and doing things for others just because you wanted to do it and how it's opened doors for me and now things you can't even see coming. I could do this for months, but this is one of the tricks to getting ahead in life. Just like Mark Cuban said, you've got to be a curious person. If you're not, you're just going to lose opportunity after opportunity after opportunity. So that's a good, healthy start, just a start on what Denver is. How to start believing in what your passions are and what you do for free and all the things we've talked about through these modules. But it's only step one. There are 3 steps to this thing. We have to take them in this order. We are working on building a really good, solid foundation for the house. But now we're going to start framing the house in the next modules. So get ready, digest this, figure out what your Denvers are, start communicating with us, and we'll take you to that next level. I will see you in step 2 very soon.